This story is bigger than the highlight reel most people remember. What happens when a high school dropout with dyslexia decides to take on the world's biggest industries? In this biography, we examine the calculated risks, the high-profile failures, and the unique branding strategies of Richard Branson. You'll see how he turned a small mail-order record business into a global powerhouse across airlines, telecommunications, and space travel. Alright, let's start with the early years. Before the private islands and airlines, Branson had to figure out how to turn a personal challenge into a market advantage. Branson struggled in traditional schooling due to severe dyslexia, which his headmaster famously said would lead him to either prison or millionaire status. Instead of viewing it as a disability, Branson used it to simplify complex business problems and focus only on what truly mattered. This taught him the value of delegation early on, as he had to rely on others to handle the technical details he couldn't process easily. It's a reminder that being the smartest person in the room is often less valuable than being the best at assembling a team. At just 16, Branson launched Student magazine to give a voice to his generation during the late 1960s. He didn't start with a massive budget, he started by identifying a specific group that was being ignored by mainstream media. By securing advertising from companies that wanted to reach young people, he learned the basics of cash flow and value exchange. This project proved that you don't need a degree to understand supply and demand if you can find a community with an unmet need. The name Virgin was chosen because Branson and his partners were complete novices in the business world. They started as a mail-order record company, undercutting high street prices by operating out of a basement. This low-overhead model allowed them to survive while they learned the logistics of retail and distribution. It highlights the importance of starting lean and choosing a brand name that allows for future expansion into almost any industry. Moving from selling records to making them was a massive leap. This era shows how Branson used creative risks to challenge established industry leaders. Branson took a significant financial risk by purchasing a country estate and converting it into a recording studio called The Manor. This provided a relaxed environment for artists, which was a sharp contrast to the clinical, corporate studios of the time. By owning the infrastructure, he could offer better terms to unconventional artists that major labels were afraid to sign. This move taught him that controlling the environment can be just as important as the product itself. The success of Virgin Records was cemented by Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, an instrumental album that almost every other label had rejected. Branson's willingness to back a project based on gut feeling rather than market data paid off when the album became a global sensation. This success provided the capital needed to sign more controversial acts like the Sex Pistols. It demonstrates that in creative industries, the biggest rewards often come from the risks others are too scared to take. Signing the Sex Pistols was a masterclass in publicity, even though it brought legal threats and public outrage. Branson recognized that the outlaw image of the band perfectly matched the rebellious spirit he wanted for the Virgin brand. This alignment of brand identity and product is what made Virgin stand out in a crowded marketplace. It shows that controversy, when handled strategically, can be a more powerful marketing tool than traditional advertising. In 1984, Branson made his most audacious move yet by entering the airline industry, a sector notorious for high costs and fierce competition. When Branson launched Virgin Atlantic with just one leased airplane, he was going up against British Airways, a massive state-backed incumbent. He couldn't outspend them, so he focused on outservicing them with better food, seatback entertainment, and a fun atmosphere. This David versus Goliath positioning made the public root for the underdog and highlighted the stuffiness of the competition. If you're entering a market with a dominant player, focus on the emotional connection with the customer that the giant has forgotten. One of Branson's most famous business lessons is how he negotiated the deal for his first Boeing 747. He secured a deal that allowed him to return the plane after 1 year if the airline wasn't profitable. This downside protection meant that even if the venture failed, it wouldn't bankrupt his entire record empire. Never enter a high-risk venture without a clear exit strategy or a way to limit your total loss. In the early 90s, British Airways engaged in a dirty tricks campaign to undermine Virgin, including poaching passengers and hacking records. Branson didn't just ignore it, he sued for libel and won a historic settlement, which he famously distributed to his staff as a BA bonus. This event solidified internal loyalty and showed the world that he would fight to protect his brand's integrity. When facing unfair competition, use the legal system and public opinion to turn the tables. With hundreds of companies under the Virgin umbrella, Branson had to develop a unique way to manage a diverse portfolio without losing control. Unlike many conglomerates, Virgin often operates through a licensing model, where they provide the brand and expertise while partners provide the majority of the capital. This allows the brand to expand into diverse sectors like trains, gyms, and mobile phones, with reduced financial exposure for Branson himself. It's a lesson in the power of brand equity. Once people trust your name, you can move into new categories much faster. However, this requires strict quality control to ensure one bad venture doesn't tarnish the entire brand. Branson doesn't run his companies from a central headquarters. Instead, each Virgin company operates as its own independent unit with its own CEO. This decentralization prevents the slow bureaucracy found in most large corporations and allows each business to stay agile. Branson acts more as a chairman and brand ambassador than a traditional micromanaging CEO. To scale a business, you must learn to trust your leaders and give them the autonomy to make their own mistakes. Not everything Branson touched turned to gold. Virgin Cola and Virgin Brides were notable failures that cost millions. However, he is known for closing failing ventures quickly rather than throwing good money after bad in an attempt to save face. He treats failure as an education and moves on to the next opportunity without hesitation. The key takeaway is to fail fast, learn the lesson, and ensure your successful ventures are large enough to cover the losses of the experimental ones. If this breakdown of Richard Branson's career helped you see business risk in a new light, subscribe for more biography deep dives. We focus on the context and decisions that actually built these empires. Thanks for watching. Like the video if you prefer life stories with context instead of gossip.